You want me to let folks in, Jasmine?
I got it.
Okay.
We're just gonna give it a moment and let the waiting room clear. Please make sure you're muted when you enter. All right, good afternoon. This is a hearing before the Boston Cannabis Board, the BCB. Today is March 21st, 2023. Today's hearing is being conducted pursuant to certain temporary amendments to the open meeting law. That is what allows us to meet virtually. This hearing is being recorded and will be posted to the City of Boston's website. Before I review some procedural matters, I will introduce Chairwoman Kathleen Joyce.
Thank you, Jasmine. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kathleen Joyce. I'm Chair of the Boston Cannabis Board. And today I'm pleased to be joined by my fellow commissioners, Commissioner Lisa Holmes, Commissioner John Smith, and Commissioner Darlene Lambos.
Thank you, Chairwoman Joyce. My name is Jasmine Nguyen, and I am the Boston Cannabis Board Manager. We are also joined by Allison Quinn, who is the Project Manager for the BCB. While the public is encouraged to attend, there will be no additional public testimony accepted. I will read each item into the record. After, I will ask for comments from each board member. I will then ask if there is a motion, any questions on the motion, and then we will vote. Each board member has the ability to grant with conditions, defer, reject without prejudice, which means the applicant can return at any time with an application at the same location, or reject with prejudice, which means the applicant cannot reapply at the same location for 1 year. Just a quick housekeeping matter. Item number 3, Rooted In LLC, has withdrawn their petition for a corporate name change at this time. The first matter we have, the applicant is Core Empowerment LLC, DBAC. The license premise is 401A Center Street, Jamaica Plain. The license type is a retail recreational cannabis dispensary license, and the license request is to amend the license to allow for delivery of recreational cannabis through a licensed marijuana courier. We'll begin with Chairwoman Joyce. Do you have any comments?
I have a few comments. The community was fine with this proposal. I liked that they really thought about the delivery windows so that it has minimal impact on the community. There's a separate door for delivery. And I think I have no other issues with this application.
Thank you. Commissioner Holmes? Nothing. Commissioner Smith?
Thanks, Jasmine. No issues. Thank you.
Commissioner Lambos?
No questions. Thank you.
Chairwoman Joyce, is there a motion?
Yes, I make a motion to approve this requested amendment.
Is there a second? Commissioner Smith, all in favor? All commissioners and none opposed. The request is granted. The next item is the applicant is East Boston Bloom LLC. The license premise is 71 Maverick Square, East Boston. The license type is a retail recreational cannabis license. The license request is a change of ownership interest and to use DBA boutique. Chairwoman Joyce, do you have any comments?
I have no issues with this request.
Commissioner Holmes? Commissioner Smith?
None. Thank you.
Commissioner Lambos? Chairwoman Joyce, is there a motion?
I make a motion to grant this request.
Is there a second? Commissioner Holmes, all in favor? All commissioners, none opposed. The request is granted. As I said earlier, the item number 3, Rooted In, has withdrawn their request for a corporate name change at this time. So before we begin with the new license applications, we're going to have our discussion on the market saturation study. We are joined by Dr. Fitzgerald. Oh, I see you. Hi. And is Mr. Whitney too? Great, thank you. I guess we could start if Dr. Fitzgerald, if you want to just introduce yourself and give a little bit of your background, and Mr. Whitney, you can follow up behind her, and then we'll move on with the discussion.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Therese Fitzgerald. I'm a City of Boston resident. I live in Dorchester. My background is social work and sociology, and I conducted the research on this project. And then I was able to, through some research that I was able to do, bring in Mr. Bo Whitney, who is a chief economist in this area. So I'll introduce Mr. Whitney of Whitney Economics.
Yeah, my name is Bo Whitney from Whitney Economics. I've been analyzing the cannabis market, adult use, medical, and industrial cannabis for 9 years now. I've been a chief operations officer of a vertically integrated cannabis company
Mike Bivens in here.
previously. My firm doesn't take a position on the legalization of cannabis. Per se, what we do is we provide data and analysis on the market itself, and we're based out of Portland, Oregon. So thank you for this opportunity today.
Thank you both for joining us today. Chairman Joyce, do you want to?
Sure. Thank you both for joining us today, and thank you for turning this study around. It leaves me with more questions, which is often the case with some of these studies. What we are trying to figure out is what is the impact, if any, on citing additional cannabis establishments within a half-mile buffer zone, almost like a hypersaturation focus. I understand there may not be any sort of research or literature that focuses specifically on that, but how would you suggest that we as the board be thinking about the economic impacts of citing cannabis establishments within such close proximity?
Yeah, so I took a look at this and compared it to other states and their saturation rates. And then I first looked at it at a macro environment statewide, and then looked at it Boston specific. And in terms of some of the methodology I used, I first looked at the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration's data on usage rates by demographic, mainly age groups. And then I looked at the population of Boston, made some projections on the number of cannabis users, and then looked at the number of retail outlets, and then determined, is there saturation, supersaturation, or not enough? In addition to that, I did a market analysis of the supply in the marketplace and how that influences price and illicit to legal consumer conversions. So in terms of the findings, what we found is that the area in question could support additional retail outlets without it becoming supersaturated. In some markets, there is a buffer of 1,000 feet, not a half a mile or a mile like is being proposed in Boston. But what we found is that because there's a lack or limited supply relative to the overall market, prices are, although they're falling, they're remaining elevated relative to the illicit or non-regulated market. What this is doing is, because there's a lack of access and higher prices, it's limiting the conversions of consumers into legal space. The impact of this is that while there's an emphasis on social equity licensees, by maintaining higher prices and less access, this is actually detrimental to the efforts on the social equity applicants. It makes them less competitive, and as a result, it makes it more difficult for them to sustain their operations in the long run. And so I'll just kind of pause there. I know that there's a lot of questions.
I just wanted to make a point that we only had a few weeks to work on this, as you noted, Commissioner. And Bo was traveling when I was able to meet with him. So he did have data on Massachusetts, but we weren't able to put together, he wasn't able to do the Boston specific analysis until very recently. And so I sent that over separately after, because the due date for the report was the end of February. So sent that over to Allison Quinn, the project manager. I believe it was just maybe yesterday or the day before. So our apologies on that, but just given the late, the quick turnaround and that Mr. Whitney was traveling at the time, he actually was kind enough to talk to me from Europe to get the report in on time for the Massachusetts data. So we were able to turn that Boston data around. I hope you're able to see it, but we just couldn't get it any earlier than that, given the analysis. Thank you.
Would you mind summarizing the Boston addendum for us?
Yeah, sure. So I kind of walked through the methodology previously, but basically what we looked at is we looked at the total number of consumers that is projected based upon the percentage of usage rates as was published by the National Institute of Health or the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Administration reports. And they put out annual reports on usage rates. In general, they kind of undercall the percentage of usage in the area, but it's government data. And so, I tend to defer to that data. And so what we looked at is the number of consumers versus the number of stores, and then compared that to other markets. And what we found is that with 22 retail outlets in Boston, initially I thought there were 11, but it appears as though there's 22. There's still room to grow in terms of the Boston market, the number of retail outlets relative to the number of consumers. By comparison, and what we found here is that even with conservative numbers on past year usage, there's one store for every 6,230 consumers. And by comparison, this is actually a higher ratio, meaning that there's less saturation than in such states as Michigan, Colorado, Oregon, and elsewhere. So while there is a concern and a justifiable concern about oversaturation, I am not quite seeing that at this point with the 22 retail outlets in Boston.
I'll turn it over to the other commissioners should you have questions.
Commissioner Smith?
Do you think that there's a number in terms of the city of Boston that you would be concerned about? Like you're saying, you're not quite seeing it now, but do you think we would get to that point?
Yeah, certainly. I think that the number of retail outlets could increase by 50% in the Boston area, from 22 to 33 at a minimum. The concern is the average revenue per retail outlet. And if you oversaturate, then it drives down the average revenue per retail establishment. And then that hurts profitability and it makes it unsustainable in the long run. So, and that disproportionately impacts the social equity applicants because it drives them out and forces consolidation. But there, like I said, there's room to grow. And that's just based upon, per capita retail outlets per capita. Now, what we've done at Whitney Economics.
I think the concern is the economic viability, especially the social equity applicants. And thinking about if it's 33, 50, you know what I mean? Like where in that, where does it kind of reach a kind of tipping point, right?
Yeah, my firm has integrated the demand models and the various ramp scenarios, and then overlaid that with the supply models to develop an integrated supply and demand model. And from there, at any given time in a ramp of a market, we're able to ascertain what is a reasonable amount of retail licenses and a reasonable amount of canopy for the cultivation side. And from there, it makes it very predictable for policymakers such as yourself to issue licenses in a controlled manner in order to maintain that viability without the detrimental effects of oversaturation on social equity applicants. So it's quite predictable is what I'm trying to get at.
So in a year, you could give us more information, maybe. in
Yeah,
terms of that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to put together a analysis on, projections of where the market could be and how many licenses. I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thanks, Jasmine.
Commissioner Holmes?
I think she might still,
There you go. I
Commissioner.
was trying to
Okay.
unmute myself.
There you go.
So my question, I you kind of answered it, but so you're saying it's the market saturation is detrimental to social equity applicants, but if a non-social equity applicant was to apply in the same location, would the same thing apply to them? I mean, it looks like we're only talking about social equity applicants and how the market saturation could be detrimental to them. But if a non-equity applicant was to apply for the same, if we were in the same situation, is it still as detrimental to their business, or are we?
Yeah, it would be. Oversaturation is detrimental to the market and as a whole. The unfortunate difference is that there's greater access to capital from non-social equity just in general relative to social equity applicants. And so as a result, they're able to sustain a prolonged period of market saturation just because they have greater access to capital and resources.
Right, I understand that point, but so the way I'm hearing this, it would behoove the applicant to look at all this market saturation before they apply for a location, as opposed to this responsibility. And I'm not shirking our responsibility, but I guess what I'm trying to say, it's not the board's fault where people decide to place their businesses. And if an applicant deems that a certain location might be beneficial for them, even if there are other social equity applicants in the area, it kind of seems to me that it sounds unfair, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. It sounds unfair.
Well, the way that I look at these things, and we have analyses on every market in the United States and every country in the world, and what we're seeing is that there's a shared responsibility. If regulators set up a regulatory structure whereby they issue too many licenses, that's detrimental. But it's incumbent upon those investors and those applicants to also do their due diligence in order to ascertain what's viable and what's not. I mean, location plays a key role in this. Average revenue per retail outlet plays another role. And then also, right now, it's a particularly difficult market because of the increases in financing costs due to higher interest rates from the Fed. So it's a tough environment right now for any new entrant into this space. And so it's really incredibly important for them to do their research. But it's also important that the regulators not set the entire market up for failure.
Right, I understand that. But as you like you said, as you saw in this study, right now you feel that there is enough room for everybody to grow and to be a participant. Right now, we haven't reached that market saturation yet.
Yeah, that's my conclusion. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Whitney. Thank you.
Commissioner Ramos?
Yeah, I have, you say the word or the term, you've been saying 33 as a potential saturation number, and aren't we supposed to be giving out 52 licenses in Boston?
Yes, we have
A minimum.
A minimum. Okay, so shouldn't they have done this study before they set that number?
So that number is.
I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, so that number is a percentage of the number of package store licenses in the city. So it will probably go up if we issue more package store licenses. I don't know why that is, but
Okay.
we tied these licenses to the number of package store licenses.
All right. so 52 would be go above and beyond this 33 number that this study is basically saying is the saturation number. Is that correct? Am I hearing that correctly?
I
So,
heard retail. I don't know if he meant retail plus, delivery, warehouse, all that stuff. So that's a good question.
yeah, my analysis was just simply on the brick and mortar retail outlets.
Mhm.
I see. Okay, so and our 52 licenses are all different kinds of types of licenses. I see. All right, and so
Actually, sorry, that's not true. The 52 is just retail. Not that
okay.
include the other types of licenses.
And it's a minimum.
Okay, that seems like a big problem, don't you think?
You know,
Yeah.
that's
This
why
study is
I
Mhm.
offered to do a more in-depth analysis and provide guidance on licensure, because see, a lot of this rests upon the conversion of consumers into the legal regulated space. And so whilst you may only need 33 in the short run, there may be a requirement for more as there's greater participation by the consumer in the legal space. So that's why I suggested that, I continue some of this analysis and provide guidance on not only how many licenses are required in the short run, meaning the next couple of years, but then what this looks like in 2025, 2027, 2030.
Okay, and I guess my other question is because you say 33 in Boston, you didn't drill down to specific neighborhoods, correct?
That is correct. Yeah, the percentage of usage rates by consumers for in the SAMHSA data, while there's some granularity, it doesn't get it down into the neighborhood or the zip code areas. It's more broader for Boston and the like.
Yeah, I do have some concern about that and wanted to see how our the fellow commissioners want to deal with that issue. I mean, it's a little bit like affordable housing to me. There's different neighborhoods that have an area median income versus a median income of all of Boston. So there are certain neighborhoods that are obviously have more affordability and some that don't. And it's similar to me in that sense, because by neighborhood really does matter in terms of how we're thinking about regulating and how we're thinking about these policies, because Boston as a whole is so diverse in terms of income and population and all that. So I imagine that the downtown Boston area would be, for a retailer would want to be, that would be where many applicants would want to apply. So I guess that is one flag, is that for this board to really think about neighborhood data and thinking about that more clearly, because that's what I'm seeing, is that we have some places that obviously we want to spread it out. We want to spread it around, but to Commissioner Holmes's point, we don't dictate how the applicants, where their locations, where they apply, but certainly we're the ones that are supposed to decide where they go, whether they get a license. And then I do just want to flag too that we are, this board it's hard because we're trying to do a lot of different things with this board. We're trying to support social equity applicants. We're trying to make sure that we have none of the workers. This isn't a race to the bottom for this industry. We've done I think we've done a good job at trying to promote good jobs, not just any job, the way that any retail jobs end up being, with benefits, career pathways, training. So we have a lot of things that we're trying to accomplish with this board. And I think some of it is at odds because profitability isn't our number one. Well, that's not my number one. I don't know. It's obviously an applicant's number one, but that's not my number one. So I think that that's another thing to really try to work through and discuss. What are we trying to do? I mean, for the city, and the role that I think that government plays is to set a minimum standard and a floor. and to not have it be a race to the bottom and actually a race to what we're seeing. And so we don't want to see social equity applicants going against other social equity applicants and not being successful. Our whole point of this board is to actually try to have all of our applicants be successful. So just some things to think about. I think this study was a first look, and would love to have drilled down to neighborhood data, and to also think about what can we really accomplish in this board to make sure that our overall goals are being met, not just profitability. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Commissioner, because a lot of what you just talked about, Bo and I have been discussing as we prepared this report. We really needed to stick to the outline of what was requested. So we were really trying to find anything about proximity, which there just wasn't anything there, and focused on market saturation. But we talked a lot about supporting local businesses and social equity applicants, and how lots, and Bo, you can, obviously jump in, you have the experience, but we would love to work with the board on, expanding the report. And if you have other, thoughts on what we can do there. But I did want to give a shout out to Boston. And again, I'm from Dorchester, so I'm proud to say that in talking to lots of experts, and I spoke to business researchers and academics and business owners across the country and in Canada, Boston is really at the cutting edge about asking about this. So no, as you could see from the report, I just couldn't find the research on proximity, but every time I spoke to someone, they said, I'm so glad Boston's doing this, or wow, Boston's being really cutting edge, because people are talking about this and saying things anecdotally, but no one's really doing, these kinds of very specific studies on proximity. So that's why it was great to find Bo, who's out there, sort of on the front lines doing this work. But I just wanted to, say that I feel like this is a first step, whether it's Bo and whether it's myself and Bo working on it, or you bring other experts in. I think it is definitely the first step in getting to the bottom of a lot of these, as you said, competing interests and issues. So thank you.
Jasmine, I have one more kind of follow-up based on what Commissioner Lombo said. Mr. Whitney, so in the report you noted about cannabis tourism having an impact, great impact. So you can almost think of Boston in a sense segregated from the, folks who are downtown and, in that area, where most of maybe all tourists go, and not into the neighborhood. But they're not coming into Roxbury or Dorchester. I also live in Dorchester or Mattapan or something like that. So would you, as a conclusion, say that in terms of folks who are making policy, as we're citing these places, we're not picking them, but folks are citing them. If the tourism accounts for so much of this business, the cannabis tourism, as you called it, because you said we wouldn't be ranked that high without it, right? That would mean it would have an impact in the neighborhoods, right? Because folks aren't necessarily coming as tourists and going into the neighborhoods.
Yeah, the Boston analysis that we just provided to the commission did not include the numbers of consumers associated with cannabis tourism, and so that would be additive. So in that sense, while I say that there could be more stores, those stores could go towards the support of the canna tourism, as we call it.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's greater opportunity, and that also tends to drive up average revenues per store, which has a snowball effect of being beneficial and to the operators because they have a greater opportunity, greater chance for sustainable and profitable businesses.
So it behooves us to think of all of Boston, including the neighborhoods, as being places where tourists should go. And that it's less contained in certain areas, right?
That's right. Yeah. And we've done canna tourism studies. There's a large debate right now in Oregon. We've done analyses of the Arizona market. We published some projections on the impact of tourism from the Super Bowl in Arizona, for example. We did Nevada and Las Vegas as well. We're digging into the New York, Massachusetts, and New Jersey markets. And so this is an emerging area that of research that we as economists are looking at and trying to develop solid methodologies, in our approach right now.
Yeah, definitely. And, while I think, Commissioner Lombos is right, profitability is not the only thing. We also understand that it takes a large amount of resources to start these businesses. And if they're in neighborhoods, they're also hiring people who have quarries and are coming out of the criminal justice system, and the commitment around all those things. If those businesses aren't sustained, then we have many people out of jobs. So it does factor for me in a sense of what more we can do, not we persistent in terms of the board, but in terms of Boston, and as we create policy, how we help sustain those businesses.
That's an excellent point. This is where the local and state policies intersect with federal policies, because if local policies support sustainable enterprises, then that's beneficial for them. But if for some reason they're not supportive and there's greater business failures, then there's no federal bankruptcy protection. And so there's wealth destruction for the very same group in the population that you're trying to support and provide greater opportunities for. So, this is a complex issue, and that's what makes it so fascinating for me to study. But there's a balance there that needs to be considered in terms of local policies and federal policies.
Thanks. I appreciate your perspectives.
Sharon Joyce.
Just one last thing. I'm always reminded that this is one of the most emerging industries, in our area and in Boston. And I think we need to be focused on both growth and saturation at the same time. And this study was commissioned to inform us about potential saturation in Boston, but I'm not quite clear as to what the conclusion is telling us to do. It seems to be telling us to focus on licensing and getting places opened. And that kind of feels like a hard pivot. So are you saying we shouldn't worry about saturation now? And if that's the case, how do we get there?
So in terms of the analysis that I tried to provide or that we tried to provide, we were trying to answer the question, is it oversaturated or not? And then if it wasn't, then further study would be required to determine where's that equilibrium or where's that balance. And so we felt like we answered the first question, but there's more research that needs to be conducted in order to determine what's that sweet spot. I think where, from my perspective at the national level and at the state level, where policymakers err is that they set up arbitrary limits and then they don't use data in order to determine those limits, and then there's unintended consequences. What I appreciate in this commission is that there is a controlled approach to this, and you're trying to use data in order to ascertain where is that equilibrium, or where does it, where will it be in the future. The benefits of using a controlled approach is that you can set up the infrastructure via the legislature or via other, councils and the like, in order to provide support for those very same equity applicants, so that you give them microloans or job skills and training and mentorship. And so that gives them a greater opportunity for success. There's larger businesses have, in general, greater business aptitudes. And so, by providing a controlled approach, predictable licensure, then you're able to develop that support infrastructure for the minority applicants as well.
All right. Do any other commissioners have any Additional questions for the researchers or just general comments? None? All right, so does the commission accept the study as is?
Yep. Motion to accept the study.
Is there a second? All in favor? All right, none opposed, so the study is accepted. Thank you so much, Dr. Fitzgerald and Mr. Whitney. I'm sure we'll be in touch in the future. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
All right, now we will move to our new license applications. The first applicant is DB Delivery Mass LLC, DBA Doobie. The proposed license premise is 1 Mount Vernon Street, Dorchester. The license type is a marijuana delivery operator. The proposed hours of operation are 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Thursday and 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Friday through Sunday. This is an equity applicant and there is a buffer zone conflict. Chairwoman Joyce.
Yes, 1 second. Thank you. I just wanted to take a look at my score sheet. I think they had a creative diversity inclusion plan, one that involved not just people, but the culture. And I'm sure other commissioners will have more to say on that. They scored very high in that category, as well as in every other category. The one letter of opposition that was received cited opposition based on traffic congestion, and they actually did commission a traffic study that I think addressed those concerns. There are 30 indoor parking spots, and I believe that would also go towards minimizing any impacts of this operator at this location. So those are my comments for now.
Commissioner Smith.
Thanks, Jasmine. Yeah, pretty much the same thing. And I think overall their plan was good. You know, always I'm looking at diversity and hiring plans. I think most of them are aspirational, but it's pretty good. So yeah, I would leave it at that for now.
Commissioner Holmes.
I agree with my fellow commissioners, a very strong application. The traffic study was very helpful because I'm familiar with that corner, and the fact that all of the trips don't really interfere with the ongoing traffic. And in fact, like Chairwoman Joyce said, there's the inside parking and their trucks and everything won't affect on-street parking or any of the abutters. So I think that was a real plus. So great application, and I think that the traffic study really topped it off.
Commissioner Lumbles.
I agree with my fellow commissioners as well. I like to agree on these things. I thought it was good. I thought that it was creative. I would say I agree with Commissioner Smith that it is aspirational, but it's creative and I like it. And I like that there's a pool tip system. I think that those are best so that there's equity across the workers who are getting that. So good wages, benefits. So I agree with my fellow commissioners. I think this is a good applicant.
Thank you. Chairwoman Joyce, is there a motion?
Yes, I make a motion to grant this application conditional upon buffer zone relief.
Is there a second? Commissioner Holmes, all in favor? And none opposed. So the petition is granted granted conditionally, pending the buffer zone variance. Okay. The next item is the applicant is Surf's Up Cannabis Venture LLC, DBA Surf's Up Cannabis Co. The proposed license premise is 770 Galvin Boulevard, Dorchester. The license type is a co-located medical and recreational cannabis dispensary license. The proposed hours of operation are 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Saturday and 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Sunday. This is a non-equity applicant and there is a buffer zone conflict with another establishment. Chairwoman Joyce.
Yes. Sorry, I was just looking over my notes. I'm familiar with this location. It's an empty Verizon building right now. I think the location is appropriate for a cannabis establishment. I would like to see a little bit more substance to the diversity inclusion plan. As far as the location, like I said, it's a vacant Verizon store. They do have a buffer zone. They do have buffer, but to me, it's not like we're comparing apples to apples. They are within the buffer zone of a delivery, non-retail application. So to me, that does distinguish it from being within the buffer zone of another retail establishment. So I just wanted to comment on that. They had a lot of support, a lot of community feedback. There was one letter of opposition that gave no context about why that woman was opposed. City councilor supported it, as well as the civic association. So other than, wanting a little bit more substance in the diversity inclusion plan, and on the employment plan, I really have no issues.
Commissioner Smith?
Thanks, Jasmine. Yep, location, you benefit from that. And your accelerated program, so that I thought was pretty strong. So that were my comments for now.
Commissioner Holmes?
I agree with my fellow commissioners. My only concern is the selling of the pre-rolls. I know we don't allow pre-rolls to be sold with a lot of our other recreational. He has a minimum of 3. So I don't know what's similar in the area. I really didn't get a chance to see who else we licensed in that vicinity and what we have allowed for them to sell. But I don't know if we can conditionally, sorry for my ring chimes. If we can conditional that the minimum pre-rolls right now are only sold on the medical side as opposed to recreational, because I know we have not allowed a lot of our recreational dispensaries to sell pre-rolls. And unfortunately, like I said, I didn't get to go back and do research on that area and what we have allowed, but I know we do allow medical a little bit more leeway than we do for recreational. So that would probably be my only concern right now, is the pre-roll sales, which I would ask or recommend that we just hold that to the medical until, because we've limited our other recreational dispensaries on selling pre-rolls.
You make a good point. We want to be able to treat these establishments the same and fairly. We can look up that information. I do remember on the medical side it's allowed, Patriot Care. I just want to make sure that we are treating them the same. So
right, exactly. So that's my only comment.
Issues about the pre-rolls.
I can't think off as far as this area, I know we put that condition on ones downtown, Back Bay.
Okay.
But I don't believe it's on any of the ones in Dorchester or.
We'll do some research. I still think we can make a motion pending more information about that, and we can go back and revisit it.
Okay. Commissioner Levels?
Yeah, I thought it was a fine application. I thought it met the minimums. I would say, like on all the points, didn't score incredibly high for me, which does concern me a little bit because there is a buffer zone. So I'm always thinking about how the buffer zone needs to kind of go above and beyond, something different, something creative. It did have a lot of community support, so I can't fault that. Sounds like a great applicant and great location. I just am concerned about, because it's a buffer zone, we don't always know what happens at the zoning board. So, and how they treat these, but it wasn't as high as I would like to see my score, at least for a buffer zone conflict, kind of a higher bar. So that's what I would say. But again, I agree, location's great. And I thought that, they had such great community support. So really good applicant, just that bar is high for the zoning board. I know.
Chairwoman Joyce, is there a motion?
Yes, my motion is to conditionally grant this license pending zoning board approval for the buffer zone and information with respect to the pre-rolls and how we've treated similar establishments.
Is there a second? All in favor? And none opposed. The petition is granted conditionally. The next applicant we have is Injaga Delivery LLC, Zaza Zoom. The proposed license premise is 1455 to 1457 VFW Parkway, West Roxbury. The license type is a marijuana courier, delivery operator, and product manufacturer license. The proposed hours of operation are for a courier and delivery operator, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 7 days a week, and manufacturing 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 7 days a week. This is an equity applicant and there is a buffer zone conflict with another establishment. Chairwoman Joyce.
I started to go through my score sheet and I struggled. I think we need more information. I know there's a community process that hasn't happened yet. So I don't feel like I can move forward with this application at this time.
Commissioner Smith.
Same, I think they need to go through the community process. And
Commissioner. Go ahead, Commissioner Smith, sorry.
oh, did you hear me? Sorry. I was thinking that they needed to go through the community process. Then we needed to hear more feedback from that.
Okay. Commissioner Holmes.
Agree. I agree with both my commissioners.
Commissioner Lagos.
Agreed, thank you.
Chairwoman Joyce. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to defer this application until the community process is over.
Is there a second? All in favor? And none opposed. So this applicant is deferred to complete the community process. The next item we have is Vinyl Roots Inc., CBA sold cannabis. The proposed license premises 340 North Market Street, Faneuil Hall. The license type is a retail recreational cannabis dispensary license. The proposed hours of operation are 9 a.m. to 11 p.m., 7 days a week. This is an equity applicant and there is a buffer zone conflict with another establishment. Chairwoman Joyce.
Thanks, Jasmine. This was a very strong application. They scored high in every category. And in particular, I wanted to talk a little bit about the location as it relates to the buffer zone. That was the one part where I had some questions on it. But before I get there, some of the things that stood out to me were the high starting salary, the support they had from elected officials, and just the unique concept. But when we have, as we were discussing earlier, when we have these buffer zones, we actually have like a statutory duty to start from a place of opposition, because we don't want to be having any negative consequences based upon where we cite these establishments. And for those that are interested, for background purposes, in August 2021, the City Council and then Acting Mayor Kim Janey approved an amendment to the cannabis ordinance that actually strengthened the buffer zone for applicants and license holders, making the location even more of a factor in the evaluation process. And that's why we have these updated score sheets that scores location as 25% of the overall application. So that's 25% of our entire evaluation. And a key part of that is whether or not there is another already licensed entity nearby. Here, not only is there already another licensed applicant nearby, there's actually 5 existing cannabis HCAs within this buffer zone. But I don't believe this tells the entire story. An existing cannabis establishment is an applicant that has been granted a license by the BCB or an establishment that holds a valid HCA with the city that pre-existed the formation of the BCB. Here, I believe, it's my opinion, we have an extraordinary situation in more than one way. This isn't just one that pierces the buffer zone, it's 5, and there's one just outside the buffer zone, which would almost make it 6. The buffer zone was instituted years ago to prevent hyperconcentration and to keep one dispensary from setting up shop a stone's throw away from another. A situation that's occurred in other parts of the country when cannabis was first legalized. We just don't know yet if we have reached saturation in the downtown area. I would argue we haven't. In other areas of the city where we have voted to pierce buffer zones, it's been a one-off situation. And I have to go back to the fact here we have 5. And we don't know yet if the downtown can support it. That's the question we've been asked to figure out. The study we heard about earlier was commissioned by the board to take a look at this. And basically it concluded that Massachusetts is not near saturation. And there's just not enough data right now to drill down to the local level. And it leaves it up to the municipality to determine whether or not, or to figure out whether we have reached saturation or have come close to it. And Faneuil Hall Marketplace is an ecosystem, or whether or not Faneuil Hall Marketplace is an ecosystem that can support this. Faneuil Hall is a tourist destination, and some would argue that the ripple effects of COVID-19 and its impact on tourism and businesses have still left the city far from pre-pandemic levels. This applicant is trying to make the case that Faneuil Hall is a separate ecosystem from downtown, and that may be the case. Cannabis was legalized in the city with the buffer zone. We can't ignore it, and I'm not ignoring it. But in recent decisions in other parts of the city, the BCB and the ZBA have decided that piercing the buffer zone makes sense. With more than 50 licenses to give out citywide in very few appropriate locations, some see the zone limit as an impediment to licensing. And as Commissioner Smith said earlier, or one of my fellow commissioners, I forget, we receive the applications. I can't say this is an awesome application, why don't you go to Fields Corner? We receive the applications attached to a certain site. I think this business concept does offer special circumstances for us to consider here. It's a recording studio, a space for artists to come together for mentorship opportunities. And the Faneuil Hall Merchant Association supports this. This isn't a business coming in to take over. It's a business that's trying to lift the tide for all the businesses around it in Faneuil Hall. Saturation is very serious consideration, but it's just one side of the coin. The other side of that coin is the effect of locking down the downtown to future extraordinary applications. I feel confident that by approving this, which to me is a very unique business concept, it would not negatively impact the cannabis ecosystem in that area, and it would actually add to the larger business environment downtown and draw foot traffic to this area, thereby helping other businesses. And that's all I got. That's for you guys.
Commissioner Smith?
Thank you, Jasmine. You know, I think the buffer zone is an important issue, and I think we should continue to think about how, you know, as these businesses come up, you know, how really they are impacting each other based on that. You know, as we looked at the saturation report, I was thinking a lot about, you know, the cannabis tourism, the canna tourism, as they called it, and that, you know, Faneuil Hall does draw a lot of tourists. So, you know, and if, you know, using that as a measure, you know, considering the 5 others that are around there, you know, thinking that, well, it will be competitive, but it's not like it's impossible, right? So just like there are 5, 6 different clothing stores and different, all kinds of things in that area, you know, you also have to think about how people market their business, who goes where, and that's up to where you decide to site your business. So I do think that I am worried a little bit about having all these businesses together, and I am worried a little bit about the saturation thing. But I also think that, you know, given where we're going to, this will always be a competitive market. And so that is up to people in terms of where they want to site and how they want to run their business. So, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Holmes?
I agree with both my fellow commissioners, and I you know, as a kid who, well, I'm not a kid anymore, but as a kid who grew up in Boston, downtown is its own, to me, own little country with different cities. And I agree with Commissioner Joyce, Chairwoman Joyce. It's like its own little ecosystem. Each section of downtown has its own set of visitors and tourists. And to me, downtown Crossing is completely different area than Faneuil Hall. And I think people who are in one particular section of that ecosystem are not going to travel outside of their comfort zone to shop and, to engage in whatever activities. So I agree. I think this was a very strong application. As you all know, I was the one who was against it in the beginning because I was concerned about the recording studio. So, I think they put together a really strong application, security, and I think they really thought through the fact of where this location was, what it meant, and what it could bring to the area. And I agree with Chairwoman Joyce. The fact that the whole market area supports and wants this business makes a big difference, because they also see how that this business can help the general area, bringing different people. It is a very unique concept. I love the music fact. We've lost that in our schools and in everything, and our youth do not really get to participate or even learn about music, whether it's live music, whether it's recorded. And the mentorship that this group is offering, and some of the support services for the greater Boston community, not just Faneuil Hall, because that artist space is going to support budding artists from across Massachusetts. So it's going to bring, I believe, a lot of new consumers to that area. And I agree. I think that downtown is a although it's a neighborhood, it is a different ecosystem than a Dorchester or a Roxbury. And we have like 5 dispensaries here right now, but I also think that they're all kind of spread out within this ecosystem that they can successfully succeed. As you say, I think the competition, and it gives them, I just think there's enough to support these places in that area.
Thank you. Commissioner Lombos.
I don't have anything to add. I think nothing new to say. I completely agree. I guess I would just thank my fellow commissioners, specifically Chairwoman Joyce. I thought your comments were very well thought out and really laid out the conundrum that we're in. We're in a conundrum. I mean, let's just be real. We want to support all of our local businesses, specifically the equity applicants. We're in a conundrum. This is not easy. I mean, I think it's a great applicant, but I don't like doing this. I don't like putting potentially, I don't like the free market system. I'm just gonna be honest. I really want to make sure that people who are responsible businesses, trying to do the right thing, paying their workers well, giving jobs to Boston residents, giving opportunities, that's what we want. So when we're having to have businesses, I guess I have something new to say. I'm sorry, I wasn't going to say all this, but I do think that the competition, I don't like it. I don't like the, market rate competition. I'm just going to say to you, and I want all these equity applicants to be successful, because they are doing incredible work for our city, and putting themselves out there to have a business, and maybe it's successful, maybe it's not, but our board wants you to be successful. So I'm in favor. I don't have anything else to say, but this is a conundrum, and I really thank my fellow commissioners for thinking very clearly and thoughtfully about how to do this in the ways that really reflect our values. So thank you.
Thank you. Chairwoman Joyce, is there a motion?
Yes, I make a motion to conditionally grant a license for this applicant pending zoning approval for the buffer zone.
Is there a second? Commissioner Holmes, all in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, and none opposed. The license is conditionally granted the buffer zone variance. All right, and the final item on is a 1-day extension for Happy Valley at 220 William McCullen, East Boston. They have applied for an extension of hours on 4/20. The applicant is requesting to open at 8 a.m. as opposed to their 10 a.m. And the applicant will close at their normal 9 p.m. Closing hour. Chairwoman Joyce.
Sure, I vote to approve.
Second. All in favor? None opposed. All right, the 1-day extension is granted. So those are all the matters before the board today. Our next hearing will take place on April 19th at 1 p.m. Hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day.